soft, eerie tone, with slow pacing. Imagine fleeing the chaos of your life, chasing peace, only to find something far darker waiting in the silence. Brief pause, then voice deepens slightly. This is the story of Dr. Mira Desai, a psychiatrist who retreated to a remote village, hoping to heal her mind, and instead discovered the horrifying truth that some things should never be noticed. Slightly faster, rising tension. The villagers of Devgarh live by a single rule: ignore them, or they will come for you. But what happens when your own grief and curiosity betray you? Soft whisper. Tonight, we follow Mira into the shadows, where the quiet ones wait, hungry for your mind. Fade to black, low hum of wind or whispers. Don't look too closely, or they might follow you home. Dr. Mira Desai had always believed she understood the human mind. She had spent more than a decade coaxing fractured thoughts into fragile coherence, untangling webs of trauma, guiding souls back from the precipice of madness. Patients at her city practice praised her calm voice and perceptive questions. Her colleagues admired her rigor. But after years of absorbing other people's darkness, something inside Mira had begun to splinter. 3 months before her trip, she found herself in her office bathroom, hands trembling, as she scrubbed at a speck of blood on her white blouse. A patient's nosebleed. Harmless, but somehow monstrous. The stain would not lift. Neither did the echo of that patient's hollow laughter. Her supervisor insisted she take a break. A long one. Get away from the city, Mira. Rest your mind. Let someone else carry the burdens for a while. It was an appealing idea, though unsettling. Mira had dedicated her entire identity to helping others. Who would she be in the quiet? A chance recommendation led her to Devgarh, a village barely marked on any map, nestled in the crook of remote hills, several hours' drive from the nearest town. No cell towers, no internet, only a landline in the tiny post office. Perfect for peace and quiet, promised the owner of a small homestay she found in a dusty travel pamphlet. She packed lightly. Simple dresses, a shawl for the chill, her battered notebook for reflections, and, reluctantly, a few case files she couldn't quite let go. Her work shadowed her, a ghost she didn't yet know how to banish. The drive stretched long and sinuous, roads narrowing until her taxi seemed to float on a ribbon between plunging valleys. Pine and oak trees crowded close, whispering secrets she couldn't hear. Fog gathered low, swirling like pale specters across the asphalt. Finally, the car emerged into a clearing. Devgarh lay ahead, a scatter of stone cottages and sloped roofs. The village square marked by a weathered fountain that had long since run dry. Smoke curled lazily from a handful of chimneys. Wooden signs, hand-painted and cracked by sun, pointed toward a modest tea shop, a shrine, a general store. There were people too. Women sweeping doorsteps, men stacking firewood, children playing with hoops. Yet something felt muted. Mira sensed it immediately, a hush beneath the normal village clatter. Conversations seemed to trail off when strangers approached. Smiles hovered uncertainly, never quite touching their eyes. Her driver, a grizzled man named Mahesh, carried her suitcase to the homestay porch. "You'll find it peaceful here, madam," he said, but his eyes darted uneasily toward the woods. She thanked him with a tip. He took it with a hurried bow and left so quickly it startled her. The dust from his tires hadn't settled before he was already vanishing down the road. The homestay was charming in its rustic simplicity. Polished wood floors, lace curtains that caught the light, a carved headboard that smelled faintly of cedar. A low table held a vase of wildflowers and a plate of tiny seed biscuits. Her hostess, Mina, was a stout woman with silver-streaked hair tied in a neat bun. She gave Mira a tour, pointing out the tiny library, the stone well out back, the garden that burst with marigolds. "Most guests come here for silence," Mina said, her voice warm but oddly strained. "They find the air heals their worries." Mira smiled. "That's exactly what I need. Quiet, time to breathe." Mina nodded, but Mira noticed the way her gaze flickered to the window, as if ensuring something, or someone, stood outside. 4. The village square. Later that afternoon, Mira wandered into the village square. The sun dipped low, painting the cobblestones in molten hues. She bought a handful of dried figs from a stall, then paused by the fountain to watch two boys playing marbles. The boys giggled, shooting brightly colored glass across the stones. Then, one of them froze, his mouth twisting oddly. His marble rolled past Mira's foot. When she bent to pick it up, the child shook his head violently. "Don't," he whispered, so soft she barely heard. "Don't what?" Mira asked, puzzled. The boy's friend tugged his sleeve urgently. Together they ran off without another word, leaving Mira standing with the marble warm in her palm. That night, Mira lay awake, listening to the strange cadence of the village. Crickets chirped, a distant owl hooted. But beneath that natural chorus was something else. A faint, deliberate whispering, like children conspiring beneath blankets. She rose and peered out her window. The street was empty, lit only by the wavering glow of lanterns. Yet the whispering seemed to curl around her eaves, slipping through cracks, tugging at her thoughts. She climbed back into bed, pulling the covers tight. It was just nerves. Her mind, still overburdened with the dark detritus of years listening to other people's nightmares, was inventing things to haunt her. Still, it took a long time for sleep to come. The next morning, Mira tried to immerse herself in the gentle rhythm of village life. She visited the shrine, bought small bundles of fragrant herbs, even helped Mina shell peas for supper. Yet everywhere she went, she noticed it again. The way conversations paused as she approached, the polite smiles that looked pasted on. People looked past her shoulders, not into her eyes. When she tried to engage them, asking about local history, about the festivals or traditions, they would offer shallow answers, then hurry away. One old man sitting on a bench by the general store met her questions with a hollow laugh. "This village has always been quiet, Doctor. Best to keep it that way." His tone chilled her. She found herself retreating to her room early that evening, telling herself she needed time to write in her notebook. At midnight, Mira woke with a start. The house was utterly still. Too still. She swung her legs over the side of the bed and padded barefoot to the window, and froze. A figure stood across the lane, directly facing her cottage. Tall, unnaturally thin, dressed in drab clothing that seemed to waver slightly, as though underwater. The face was obscured by shadow, but she sensed eyes, large, unblinking, fixed on her window. Her pulse thundered. Some instinct screamed at her to close the curtains, to hide, to look away. Instead, curiosity pinned her in place. The figure didn't move, didn't wave or speak. It only watched. Then a strange thought rose in her mind, unwelcome and sharp. If I keep looking, it will come closer. With a gasp, Mira snapped the curtains shut and stumbled backward. She crawled into bed, heart pounding so violently, she thought it might burst. She didn't open the window again that night. The next day, determined to anchor herself in reality, Mira visited the village's tiny tea shop. The proprietress was a stooped old woman named Sarla, her eyes filmed with cataracts. Yet there was a keenness in her movements, a shrewdness that suggested blindness hadn't dulled her awareness. Over steaming cups of spiced chai, Mira hesitated, then confessed, "Last night I saw someone standing outside, just watching. It frightened me." Sarla's hand tightened on her cup. Her knuckles stood out sharp and white. "They come for all strangers at first," she whispered, "testing, seeking those who will feed them." Mira frowned. "Who comes?" Sarla leaned forward, breath warm with cardamom. "The quiet ones. They've been here longer than the oldest grave. Don't speak to them. Don't even look at them too long. If you do, they'll latch on, follow you everywhere. They feed on the weight of your notice, on the cracks in your mind." A tiny, incredulous laugh escaped Mira. "Are you saying ghosts, spirits?" Sarla shook her head, her expression haunted. "Worse. They aren't dead. They aren't anything that simple. They're the hush between heartbeats, the echo when no one answers." That evening, Mira tried to dismiss the conversation as the local flavor of superstition. After all, rural communities often wove strange myths to explain the unexplained. But as darkness deepened outside her window, the village seemed to fold in on itself. Shadows pooled too thickly in corners. The faintest draft sounded like breath against her ear. And once, just once, as she passed her mirror, she thought she saw someone standing behind her. A shape taller than any person, head cocked, as if listening. When she spun around, the room was empty. Unable to sleep, she crept downstairs and out onto the porch. The air was damp, laced with the scent of moss and earth. Across the lane, moonlight revealed faint disturbances in the dust. A line of small, perfect footprints leading from the edge of the forest, straight toward her door. They stopped at the threshold, as if something had stood there for a long, patient while. Mira's hands trembled. Against her better judgment, she knelt to inspect the prints. They were oddly delicate, narrower than any adult's, but too long to belong to a child, almost elegant. Her fingers hovered above one, feeling a curious coldness radiate from the indentation. Suddenly, a low whisper gusted by her ear. Not words, more like a sigh of recognition. She jerked upright, heart stumbling, and fled inside. That night, she slept with a chair propped against her door. The following morning, Mira wrote frantically in her notebook. 3 nights now. I hear them whispering, saw the footprints, saw something in my mirror. Either I'm unraveling completely, or this village truly harbors something malignant. The villagers know. Their careful avoidance isn't simple rudeness, it's survival. I should leave, but part of me feels anchored here, as if the very air clings to my lungs, urging me to stay. Perhaps that's how it starts. Desperate for clarity, Mira sought out the village priest, a gaunt man named Father Anil, who maintained a crumbling shrine at the edge of Devgarh. When she explained her experiences, his expression turned stricken. "You've noticed them too clearly," he said, voice thin with dread. "They thrive on being seen, on being named. Each time you pay attention, you bind yourself tighter to them." "What can I do?" Mira whispered. Father Anil swallowed. "Forget them. Ignore every strange shape, every whisper. If they stand at your window, let them. If they call your name, do not answer. It is the only way." Then abruptly he rose and fled deeper into the shrine, leaving her alone with the scent of old incense and a sudden, seeping chill. That night, the village seemed to hold its breath. Even the usual crickets fell silent. Mira lay rigid in her bed, staring at the ceiling. Hours slipped by, measured only by the relentless drum of her heartbeat. Then, so softly she almost thought she imagined it, came a rustle at her door. A faint, deliberate pressure against the wood. The chair braced under the handle creaked, as if testing its strength. She squeezed her eyes shut. "Ignore them." A whisper slipped through the crack, a voice uncannily familiar. It sounded like her own mother calling from beyond the grave. "Mira, open the door. It's cold out here." Tears leaked from the corners of her eyes. She did not move. Eventually, the pressure eased. The voice faded. When dawn finally broke, Mira stumbled outside to find the chair toppled over. The door stood ajar. She was certain she had locked it. And across the threshold, delicate footprints trailed away into the mist. She sank to her knees, a cold horror settling in her bones. Something had been inside, watching, waiting. For 2 days after the door incident, Mira stayed inside. She told herself it was to rest, to read, to regain her nerves. But in truth, she was afraid. Afraid that if she stepped beyond the porch, the quiet ones would be waiting. She watched from behind lace curtains as villagers moved through their routines, fetching water, tending goats, trading quiet words in clusters that always seemed to dissolve when she looked too long. Even Mina grew more withdrawn. She would bring meals with forced cheer, quickly retreating down the hall. Mira began to wonder if the woman even slept, or simply kept vigil for more intrusions. On the third morning, unable to endure her own mounting terror, Mira found Mina in the garden. She blurted out her questions, words tumbling out in a rush. "Why does no one talk about them? About the ones who come at night? The footprints? The voices? How do you all live like this?" Mina's pruning shears slipped, nearly slicing her thumb. She stared at Mira for a long, hollow moment. Then, with a sigh so heavy it seemed to bend her shoulders, she beckoned Mira to sit on a low stone bench. "There is only one rule here," Mina whispered. Her eyes darted left and right, as though the marigolds might be listening. "Do not engage them. Do not answer. Do not follow. Do not acknowledge them more than you must. They are drawn to attention, to the gravity of your notice. Once you feed them that way, they stay, and it becomes harder each day to look away." Mira shivered. "But what are they?" Mina's mouth twisted. "Hunger, perhaps. Not of flesh, but of the mind. They burrow into thoughts, into the tender places left open by grief, or guilt, or doubt. They are nothing, and yet everything. Silence made shape, emptiness that thirsts." That evening, Mira forced herself into the village square. She hoped, desperately, that the rhythm of daily life might anchor her, prove Mina's warnings to be little more than old superstition. Children chased a cloth ball near the fountain. Women bartered for spices. It seemed almost normal, until she passed a narrow lane. and saw, half in shadow, a figure standing utterly still, tall, thin, clothes that blurred at the edges like wet charcoal on canvas, no face that she could see. Yet she felt its gaze, cool and invasive, pouring over her skin. Her breath caught. Her feet wanted to turn, to walk toward it, to ask why. A rustle beside her, the old man from the general store. His hand gripped her arm, tight as a vice. "Walk on, doctor," he hissed, voice raw with urgency. "Don't give it even a heartbeat more of your attention." Mira tore her eyes away, heart lurching painfully, and let him steer her toward the square. Back in her room, Mira wrote furiously in her notebook, her script jagged, blotched by trembling hands. It is a kind of curse. Awareness breeds connection. They want to be known. The moment you let your thoughts linger, they find purchase, like mold in damp corners. She paused, pen hovering, then scrawled beneath it. The rule is simple, yet it feels impossibly cruel. How does one unsee what has already been seen? That night, the quiet ones tested her resolve. It began with soft scratching at her window, like fingernails on glass, delicate, almost playful. She clenched her eyes shut, reciting lines of poetry to drown it out. But then came a voice, light, musical, the very cadence of her late father. "Mira, little bird, why lock yourself away? Come open the window. Let me see you again." Tears spilled hot across her cheeks. Her father had called her that, once, little bird, on sunlit afternoons that smelled of cut grass and old books. Her hand crept toward the latch. She stopped, dug her nails into her palm until she felt blood bloom. "This is not him. This is not real. Do not answer. Do not look." When the first pale rays of morning unfurled across the village, Mira lay on her bed, shivering. The voice had retreated hours before. She rose on unsteady legs and found fresh footprints outside her window, long, graceful, trailing away, as if disappointed. Later, Mina found her sitting by the hearth, staring into cold ashes. Without a word, the woman placed a steaming cup in her hands. Mira didn't drink. "I almost opened the window last night," she whispered. Mina closed her eyes. "Most do. The first time. Or the second. But not forever, if you learn. That's all this village survives on, learning to starve them of the very thing they crave." Mira swallowed. "Attention." Mina nodded. "Yes, your mind is a feast to them. Your grief, your longing, your curiosity. Keep your gaze on the living, doctor. That is the only mercy left." And so the rule settled into Mira like a second heartbeat. Ignore them. Ignore the voices that crooned from behind doorways. Ignore the shapes that loitered at the edge of lantern light. Ignore the gentle tapping on her walls, as though asking politely to be let in. She wrote it on scraps of paper, pinned them above her bed, muttered it under her breath when she went to the market. Ignore them. Ignore them. Ignore them. Because here in Devgarh, survival was not about running or hiding. It was about refusing to offer up the fragile light of human attention to things that should never have been seen at all. Days bled together in Devgarh. Mira moved through them like a sleepwalker, fetching water from the well, sitting by the hearth with her notebook open yet blank, listening to the village's cautious murmur. The rule had become a chant in her mind. Ignore them. Ignore them. Yet every so often, her thoughts slipped. Curiosity rose like a sly serpent, whispering, "What if you just looked, just once more?" 2. The letter 1. Fog-soaked morning, Mira found an envelope slipped beneath her door. Heavy parchment, unmarked. Her hands shook as she unfolded it. Inside, In a looping hand that seemed almost playful was a single line. "Come to the old orchard at dusk. We wish to be known." She read it once, twice, then crumpled it so violently it tore. "No," she hissed to the empty room. I won't feed you." But the damage was done. Even reading it, even considering, had cracked the fragile walls she'd built around her thoughts. That evening, Mira sat on her porch, eyes fixed on the horizon, watching, waiting. She told herself she was only making sure they wouldn't come for her. But deep inside, something ugly and yearning stirred. As the sun slid behind the hills, painting the world in bruised purples and iron reds, she rose. Her feet carried her down the lane, past shuttered windows and doors bolted tight, past the shrine where Father Anil knelt alone, head bowed, hands clenched so hard they bled. Into the woods she walked, breath shallow, until she stood before the orchard. Gnarled apple trees heavy with rot, their branches clutching at the darkening sky. They waited there, a ring of them, tall, impossibly thin shapes, their outlines smudged as though the world itself tried to reject them. No eyes, no mouths. Yet she felt their smiles, like knives sliding along the inside of her skin. One stepped forward, its arm lifted, boneless and elegant, beckoning. Mira's pulse thudded painfully. She wanted to flee. Instead, she took a step closer. Then, sound, not from mouths, but from everywhere at once. Voices threaded together, high and low, familiar and monstrous. "See us, know us, welcome us into the soft places of your mind." Tears pricked her eyes. Their words caressed old wounds she'd hidden even from herself, her failures, her loneliness, her aching need to be seen. They pressed closer. Their nearness was a cold that burned. "You have carried so many burdens for others. Let us carry you." A thin wail escaped her lips. She pressed her hands over her ears, but the voices slipped inside anyway, curling sweetly around her thoughts. Suddenly, a memory, Mina's lined face. "Ignore them." She clenched her jaw, shook her head violently. "No, I won't. I refuse." The figures recoiled as if struck. The orchard seemed to twist, trunks bending inward. "You will look. You will listen. You will give us the gift of your mind." Mira dropped to her knees, clutching dirt and dead leaves. She forced her thoughts toward mundane things, the taste of tea, the smell of cedar, the scratch of pen on paper. Anything but them. A scream, theirs, not hers, split the orchard, sharp and discordant, like glass fracturing inside her skull. Then silence. When she dared lift her head, they were gone. The orchard stood empty, the air shivering around her as if the world was knitting itself back together. Mira stumbled home in the dark. Her body felt hollow, scraped clean by cold fingers. She collapsed onto her bed, eyes open, unable to blink for a long time. Eventually, exhaustion dragged her under. In dreams, they stood at the foot of her bed, whispering invitations she almost accepted. At dawn, Mira found Mina waiting in the hall. The older woman's eyes brimmed with sorrow, but also grim pride. "You went to them," Mina said softly. "But you came back. Not many do." Mira's voice was a ragged rasp. "It's not over, is it?" Mina shook her head. "Number. They'll keep calling. All your life, perhaps. But you've learned the most important lesson, that your mind is yours. Attention is a gift, and you decide who receives it." That evening, Mira sat by her window, watching fog drift through the village streets. Somewhere beyond the trees, faint shapes stirred, hopeful, hungry. She closed her eyes. Ignore them. And for the first time since arriving in Devgarh, she felt truly, fiercely alive. Because now she understood. The rule was not only a burden, it was a shield. And she would wield it, again and again, no matter how sweet their invitations became. A week later, Mira stood by the village square, suitcase at her feet. Mahesh's taxi idled nearby, the engine sputtering like a tired animal. Meena hugged her tightly, hands rough and warm against Mira's back. "Write to me, child, even if it's only to say you're still holding on." Mira nodded, throat too tight to answer. As the taxi pulled away, Devgarh faded behind the veil of trees and fog. Yet something in the forest seemed to lean closer, as if watching her go. When Mira returned to the city, everything was noise. Car horns blared, people shouted into glowing screens, neon bled across rain-soaked streets. It should have been a relief. But at night, the rush of traffic outside her window sounded almost like whispering. She would wake with her pulse galloping, staring into shadows that seemed to stretch long fingers toward her bed. Her patience returned, broken voices filling her office. Stories of betrayal, grief, hollow places that yawned wide beneath calm faces. Mira listened, soothed, offered careful guidance. But inside, something fragile trembled. Because every story felt like an echo of Devgarh, of the way attention could become an offering, of how easily the mind's door could creak open. One rainy afternoon, she sat alone in her office, sunlight tangled behind heavy clouds. She reached for her pen, then froze. From the far corner of the room, a voice drifted out, software playful, unmistakable. "Mira, little bird, you didn't think we'd forget you, did you?" Her pen clattered to the floor. She pressed her back to the chair, nails digging into the arms. "Ignore them. Ignore them." But the voice persisted, closer now, curling warm against her ear. "We missed you. It's so lonely, so empty, without the sweetness of your thoughts." Her breath fractured. The office walls seemed to warp, pictures tilting on their hooks. In the glass surface of her desk, she thought she glimpsed thin figures crowding close, their faces voids that pulsed with hunger. She squeezed her eyes shut. Not real. Not here. Minutes, or hours, crawled by. When she finally opened her eyes, the room was still. The desk lay scattered with patient files. Outside, rain continued its gentle assault on the windows. She took a shaking breath. "You can come," she whispered to the empty office. "But I will not welcome you. I will not feed you." No reply came. Only a subtle pressure, like an unwelcome hand on her shoulder, before slipping away. That night, Mira lit a candle by her bedside. Its tiny flame felt absurdly fragile, yet fierce. She whispered Mina's words like a prayer. "My mind is my own. My attention is a gift, and I decide who receives it." Outside her apartment, the city surged on, but deep in the empty spaces where the quiet ones prowled, she felt their frustration. They could wait. They would wait. But she would make them starve. Over weeks, the whispers came less often. Sometimes only a sigh that stirred her hair, or a ripple in her peripheral vision. Each time, she repeated her silent mantra. "Ignore them. Ignore them." Until even the shadows seemed to sulk away, denied their feast. One morning, she sat at her small kitchen table, writing to Mina. The words spilled gently, like water finding its level. "I still hear them sometimes, but I am stronger now. Thank you for teaching me the rule. and for showing me that it was always mine to wield. And so Mira continued her work, helping mine stitch themselves back together, guarding her own tender places with new, fierce vigilance, because Devgarh had never truly let her go, but neither had she let them win. In the hush between patient confessions, in the quiet of her own thoughts, she stood vigilant, holding her rule like a lantern against the dark.